When a desperate mother's knock changed everything, he lost his family. She saved his soul. What would you do if a stranger knocked on your door in a deadly blizzard, carrying two starving children, and a secret that could destroy everything? When Jackson Mercer, a broken rancher who lost his wife and baby 3 years ago, opens his barn door to a desperate woman on the run, he has no idea that the 5-year-old boy she's protecting hums a lullaby only his dead wife knew. This is a story about how the dead speak to the living, how broken hearts learn to beat again, and why sometimes losing everything is the only way to find what you were meant to have. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell because this story will shatter you and rebuild you in ways you never expected. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I want to see how far this miracle travels. Now let's begin. The nightmare always started the same way. Jackson Mercer was riding hard through a March blizzard 3 years ago, his horse's hooves pounding through snow that came up to its belly. In his saddlebags, he carried the money from selling 30 head of cattle, enough to buy the new crib Catherine wanted, the one made of cherry wood with carved angels on the headboard. She'd been so specific about those angels. "They'll watch over our Lily when we can't," she'd said, her hand on her swollen belly glowing with 8 months of pregnancy. But in the nightmare, the snow turned to quicksand. The harder he rode, the slower the horse moved. He could see the ranch in the distance, see the lights in the windows, even see Caleb's silhouette pacing on the porch. The old foreman was waving frantically, shouting something Jackson couldn't hear over the wind. Then the scene would shift, and he'd be standing in their bedroom doorway. Catherine lay in bed, her golden hair spread across pillows soaked in blood. Her blue eyes, usually so bright with laughter, stared at nothing. In her arms, she held a tiny bundle wrapped in the quilt her mother had made. "Her name is Lily," Catherine whispered with her last breath. "She would have loved you so much." Jackson woke with a gasp, his shirt soaked with sweat despite the February cold that had seeped through every crack in the house. 3 years. 3 years of the same nightmare. 3 years of waking up alone in a bed that still smelled faintly of Catherine's lavender soap because he couldn't bring himself to wash the last pillowcase. He sat up, feet hitting the cold floor, and reached for the bottle of whiskey on the nightstand. Empty. He'd finished it last night while sitting in what should have been Lily's nursery, staring at the empty crib with its carved angels that had arrived 2 days after the funeral. The sound of footsteps on the porch made him reach for his rifle. Too early for Caleb, too late for anyone with good intentions. "Jackson?" Caleb's voice, but wrong somehow. Urgent. Worried. Jackson pulled on his boots and coat, grabbed the rifle, and opened the door. His foreman stood there, 70 years old, but still sturdy as an oak, his weathered face creased with concern. "You're up early," Jackson said. "Never went to bed. Was watching the storm coming in from the north. Going to be a bad one, Jackson. Maybe the worst we've seen." Jackson looked at the sky. Still dark, but the stars were ghosts swallowed by clouds that seemed to press down on the world like a burial shroud. "We need to move the cattle to the south pasture," Caleb continued. "Get them behind the tree break. Let them freeze." "Why, Jackson, I said let them freeze," and Jackson pushed past him, heading for the barn. "I got something to do." "You're going to the cemetery again." It wasn't a question. Every Sunday for 3 years, Jackson made the trek to the small family plot on the hill. Sometimes he brought flowers. Sometimes he brought whiskey. Always he brought his guilt. "Ground's frozen solid," Caleb said, following him. "You can't plant nothing in this." Jackson didn't answer, just saddled his horse with movements so automatic he didn't have to think. Thinking was dangerous. Thinking led to remembering. Remembering led to feeling. "She wouldn't want this," Caleb said quietly, Jackson's hands stilled on the saddle. "How would you know what she'd want?" "Because I knew her better than—" Caleb stopped abruptly. "Better than what?" Jackson turned, something dangerous in his voice. "Nothing, just the storm's coming fast. Don't stay out there too long." Jackson mounted his horse without another word and rode out into the growing wind. Behind him, Caleb stood in the barn doorway, one hand pressed to his chest, where he kept a locket no one ever saw, containing a picture of the daughter he'd given up 40 years ago. The daughter who'd grown up to marry Jackson Mercer. The daughter who'd died calling for a father who wasn't the man she thought he was. The cemetery sat on a hill overlooking the valley. Jackson had chosen the spot himself back when they'd first bought the ranch and were full of dreams about the dynasty they'd build. "We'll be buried here," Catherine had said, laughing as she spun in circles, arms wide. When we're old and gray and have seen our grandchildren's grandchildren. Now she lay there at 28 next to a daughter who'd never taken a breath outside her mother's womb. Jackson dismounted, pulled the rosebush from his saddlebag. He'd bought it from a traveling merchant 2 weeks ago, kept it alive in the barn with careful watering and a blanket on cold nights. Catherine had loved roses. Their first house before the ranch had been surrounded by them. He fell to his knees beside her headstone and began to dig with his bare hands the frozen earth tearing his skin. The pain felt good, real, deserved. Should have been me, he said to the stone. Should have been there. Should have known something was wrong when you went into labor early. Should have. The wind snatched his words away. Snow began to fall, first a few flakes, then thick curtains of white. Jackson kept digging, his hands now bleeding freely, the blood turning the snow pink. That's when he heard it. A humming soft and sweet carried on the wind. A melody he knew better than his own heartbeat. The lullaby Catherine had created when she first felt Lily kick. She'd spent hours perfecting it, making up words, then discarding them. The melody is enough, she'd said. Sometimes love doesn't need words. Jackson's head snapped up, looking around wildly. The cemetery was empty. The wind howled. But still that humming continued, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Catherine, he whispered. The humming stopped. The wind died a thud. For a moment, the world held its breath. Then the blizzard hit with the force of a charging bull. Jackson barely made it back to the ranch. His horse knew the way better than he did finding the barn through whiteout conditions that made it impossible to see more than 3 feet ahead. He stumbled through the door, ice coating his beard, his hands so numb he couldn't feel the reins. Caleb was waiting. Fool boy, nearly got yourself killed. Heard something, Jackson mumbled through frozen lips. In the cemetery, music. That's the wind playing tricks. Come on, let's get you inside before you lose those fingers. They made it to the house just as the full fury of the storm hit. The windows rattled. The roof groaned. Somewhere a shutter tore free and banged against the wall like a frantic knock. Martha Stone, Caleb's wife, had left a pot of stew on the stove. Jackson ate mechanically, not tasting, while Caleb tended the fire and muttered about young fools with death wishes. You need to stop this, Caleb said finally. This punishment you are giving yourself. Not punishing myself enough. Catherine's gone, boy. Lily's gone. But you're still here. That's the punishment. Caleb opened his mouth to argue, then stopped. Cocked his head. You hear that? Jackson listened. Through the howling wind, the groaning timber, the rattling windows came another sound. Knocking. Deliberate. Desperate. Not at the house door, at the barn. Jackson grabbed his rifle. Could be rustlers or wolves seeking shelter. Wolves don't knock, Caleb said, reaching for his shotgun. They fought their way back to the barn, the wind trying to tear them off their feet. The knocking came again, weaker now. Jackson raised his rifle, nodded to Caleb, then yanked the door open. A woman stood there, or what was left of one. She couldn't have been older than 25, her dark hair frozen to her skull, her lips blue with cold. But it wasn't her that made Jackson's breath catch. It was the children. She held 2 of them, a girl of maybe 7 and a boy who couldn't be more than 5. The boy's feet were wrapped in burlap sacks, the girl's thin coat torn and useless against the cold. All 3 of them looked like they'd been walking through the storm for hours. Please, the woman said, her voice barely a whisper. Please, just the barn. Just tonight. We won't steal nothing. Won't cause trouble. Just, please. The boy lifted his head from his mother's shoulder, and he was humming. The same melody. Catherine's melody. Note for note, perfect and clear despite his chattering teeth. The rifle slipped from Jackson's nerveless fingers, clattering on the frozen ground. Dear God, Caleb breathed. The woman's eyes widened in alarm. We'll go. I'm sorry. No. Jackson's voice came out rough. No, you come inside. The house. Now. The barn is the house, Jackson said firmly. Children won't last the night out here. He reached for the boy who was barely conscious. The child came willingly, wrapping thin arms around Jackson's neck. And still humming Catherine's song. They stumbled through the storm to the house. The woman carried the girl, Caleb brought up the rear, and Jackson carried the boy who weighed nothing, like holding a bird of all hollow bones and fading warmth. Inside, the warmth hit them like a physical thing. The woman swayed, nearly fell. Caleb caught her, guided her to a chair by the fire. Get them dry clothes. Jackson ordered, his body moving on instinct now. There's some in the back room. Catherine's things might fit her. The children. He trailed off. In the back of the closet were clothes Catherine had bought for Lily. Different sizes because she couldn't help herself. She'll grow into them, she'd said, laughing at her own foolishness. While Caleb helped them change, Jackson heated soup, found bread, set the table with hands that shook. The boy had stopped humming, but Jackson could still hear it echoing in his skull like a bell that wouldn't stop ringing. When they emerged, dressed in Catherine's wool dress and the children in clothes that should have belonged to a dead daughter, Jackson had to turn away. I'm Sarah, the woman said quietly. Sarah Bennett. These are my siblings, Emma and Thomas. Not her children. Her siblings. Jackson filed that information away. Jackson Mercer. That's Caleb Stone, my foreman. Sarah nodded, gathering the children close. They sat at the table eating soup with the careful precision of people who hadn't seen food in too long. The girl Emma kept glancing at Jackson with solemn, too-old eyes. The boy Thomas seemed to be falling asleep in his bowl. That song, Jackson said suddenly. Where did he learn it? Sarah looked confused. What song? The one he was humming. When I opened the barn door. She listened. Thomas was humming again, so quiet it was barely audible. Sarah's face went pale. I don't know. He's always done it, since he was a baby. Mother said he came out humming instead of crying. She tried to smile. Said it meant he'd have a gentle soul. Your mother, where is she? Dead, last year. Fever took her. Your father, Sarah's face went very still. Dead, 2 weeks ago. Jackson heard what she didn't say, the careful way she said it, the tension in her shoulders. I'm sorry for your loss. Are you Tom? Her eyes met his, challenging. Most people aren't sorry when a debtor dies. They're just angry they won't get their owed money. Your father owed money. Doesn't matter now. She stood, gathering the children. We should go to the barn. We've imposed enough. Sit down. The command in his voice surprised everyone, including himself. Sarah sat slowly, warily. Storm's going to last days, Jackson said. You go to that barn, you'll be frozen corpses by morning. You'll stay here. We don't take charity. Not offering charity, offering shelter. Different thing. Is it? Jackson looked at Thomas, who was humming again, his eyes closed, swaying slightly. That melody, that impossible melody that no one else should know. Yeah, he said quietly. It is. That night, Jackson put them in the guest room. It had been Catherine's sewing room, but he'd moved a bed in there 3 years ago when he couldn't stand sleeping in their bedroom anymore. Sarah tried to protest, said the floor would be fine, but Jackson wouldn't hear it. The boy's sick, he said. Needs a proper bed. Thomas wasn't exactly sick, but he wasn't well either. He drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes mumbling words no one could understand, always humming that song. Jackson found himself standing in the doorway watching Sarah tuck the children in. She sang to them something sick and Irish-sounding, her voice rough from the cold but still sweet. Emma fell asleep first, curled around her brother protectively. Thomas took longer, those strange, too knowing eyes fixed on Jackson. The lady says you're sad, Thomas said suddenly, clearly. Sarah started. Thomas, don't. What lady? Jackson asked, his mouth dry. The one with yellow hair, like sunshine. She sings the song too. Your song. Jackson gripped the door frame so hard the wood creaked. When do you see this lady? In dreams. She's nice, but sad. She misses her baby. Thomas's eyes, dark and fathomless, never left Jackson's face. She says the baby's name was Lily. Sarah gasped. Jackson couldn't breathe. No one knew that name except him and Caleb and Martha. They'd never even put it on the headstone, just beloved daughter. She says, Thomas yawned, his eyes finally closing. She says thank you for trying to plant the roses. But you don't need to hurt yourself. She forgives you. Then he was asleep, humming that melody even in his dreams. Jackson stumbled from the room, made it to the kitchen before his legs gave out. He sat at the table, head in his hands, shoulders shaking with sobs he had held back for 3 years. That's how Sarah found him. She didn't say anything, just sat across from him and waited. When the storm inside him finally quieted, she pushed a cup of coffee into his hands. My wife died 3 years ago, he said, voice raw. Giving birth to our daughter, I was gone. selling cattle 3 towns over. By the time I got back, he started again. That song Thomas hums. Catherine made it up for Lily, sang it to her every day she was pregnant. No one else knew it. No one. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then, my mother always said Thomas was special, different. He knows things he shouldn't know, sees things. She wrapped her hands around her own cup. It scared Father. He thought it was devil's work. What do you think? I think God works in ways we don't understand. I think sometimes he sends messages through unlikely messengers. She looked toward the room where the children slept. I think maybe we were meant to find you. Why, Fio? Because you're the first person who's helped us without wanting something in return. Jackson studied her, even exhausted, even worn down by cold and fear and grief. She was beautiful. Not like Catherine's golden sunshine beauty. Sarah was all dark hair and storm gray eyes and stubborn chin. Beautiful like a blade was beautiful. Sharp and dangerous and necessary. Someone's hunting you, he said. It wasn't a question. Sarah's jaw tightened. Yes. Who? Does it matter? If they show up at my door, I'd like to know who I'm shooting. A surprised laugh escaped her. You'd do that? Shoot someone for strangers? Jackson thought about Thomas's eyes, about the humming, about Catherine's message delivered through a 5-year-old boy. Yeah, he said, I would. Sarah studied him for a long moment. Then she told him everything. Victor Blackwood, the debt, the offer to take her as payment, her father's refusal, then his convenient suicide that Thomas had witnessed, the midnight flight with nothing but the clothes on their backs. He owns the sheriff, she finished, the judge, half the county. We ran because there was no justice to be found. And you came here. We were heading to Idaho. I have an aunt there, but the storm, she shrugged. We saw your barn, thought we could wait it out. Idaho's a long way, especially in winter, especially with children. We'd have made it. No, Jackson said quietly. You wouldn't have. They sat in silence, listening to the storm rage outside. Finally, Sarah stood. I should check on them. Sarah, she stopped at his voice. You're safe here. All of you, I promise. She looked back at him, and for the first time since he'd opened that barn door, she truly smiled. It transformed her face, turned her from beautiful to devastating. I believe you, she said, and disappeared down the hall. Jackson sat alone in his kitchen, listening to the wind, thinking about impossible things, about songs that crossed between worlds, about children who knew things they couldn't know, about a woman with storm gray eyes who made him feel something other than dead inside for the first time in 3 years. Caleb found him there an hour later. You all right, boy? That song, Caleb, he knows Catherine's song. The old man's face went very still. Maybe it's coincidence. Maybe he knows Lily's name, says he sees Catherine in dreams. Caleb sank into a chair, suddenly looking every one of his 70 years. Dear God, you believe it, that it's possible? Caleb was quiet for so long, Jackson thought he wouldn't answer. Then, Catherine's mother, she had the gift, saw things, knew things. Catherine never showed signs of it, but blood tells sometimes, maybe not in life, but after. You knew Catherine's mother. Something flickered across Caleb's face. I knew of her, by reputation. They sat in companionable silence, two men confronted by the impossible, choosing to believe because the alternative was madness. The woman Sarah, Caleb said finally, she's in trouble. I know, bad trouble, the kind that follows. I know. You planning to get involved? Jackson thought about Sarah's smile, about Emma's solemn eyes, about Thomas's humming. I think I already am. The next morning the storm had worsened. Snow piled against the windows and the wind screamed like something dying. But inside the house, something had changed. Jackson woke to the smell of breakfast cooking. Real breakfast, not the coffee and stale bread he usually managed. He followed the scent to find Sarah at the stove, Thomas sitting at the table drawing with a piece of charcoal on old paper, Emma reading one of Catherine's books. Morning, Sarah said without turning. Hope you don't mind. Wanted to earn our keep. You don't have to. Yes, I do. She turned spatula in hand, and Jackson saw the steel in her spine. I pay my debts, Mr. Mercer. Well, Jackson. Just Jackson. Jackson, then. She turned back to the stove. And I'm just Sarah. Thomas looked up from his drawing. Good morning, Mr. Jackson. The yellow-haired lady says thank you for keeping us warm. Jackson's coffee cup stopped halfway to his mouth. She, did she say anything else? Thomas nodded solemnly. She says the roses will grow in spring. She says love doesn't die, it just sleeps under the snow until the sun comes back. Emma looked up from her book. Thomas sees things, she said matter-of-factly. Mama said it was a gift. Papa said it was a curse. What do you think? Jackson asked her. Emma considered this with the gravity of someone twice her age. I think it's both. Most gifts are smart child, too smart, the kind of smart that came in from seeing too much too young. They ate breakfast together, the four of them around Jackson's too big table, and for the first time in 3 years, the house didn't feel empty. It felt waiting, like it had been holding its breath all this time, and now it could finally exhale. After breakfast, Sarah insisted on cleaning. Jackson tried to help, but she shooed him away. You've got ranch work even in this storm. Go on. So he and Caleb saw to the animals breaking ice on water troughs, spreading hay, checking for signs of sickness or injury. Normal work? Good work. The kind that kept a man's hands busy and his mind quiet. But Jackson's mind wouldn't quiet. It kept circling back to the house, to Sarah at his stove, to Thomas's impossible knowledge, to Emma's too old eyes. You're thinking too loud, Caleb said. Can't help it. She's a pretty woman. That's not, Jackson stopped. It's not about that. Isn't it? Catherine's been gone 3 years and I haven't looked at another woman. Haven't wanted to. And now, Jackson was quiet watching his breath cloud in the cold air. Now there's a woman in my kitchen and children at my table, and one of those children speaks to my dead wife in his dreams. What am I supposed to do with that, Caleb? Maybe the old man said carefully, you're supposed to do exactly what you're doing. Give them shelter. Keep them safe. See what happens. And if trouble follows them, Caleb's weathered face hardened. Then we handle it, like we always have. That afternoon, the storm briefly quieted. Jackson was in the barn mending a harness when Thomas appeared. The boy moved so quietly, Jackson didn't hear him until he spoke. Are you angry at her? Jackson looked down. Thomas stood there too small for the borrowed coat, dark eyes serious. At who? The yellow hair lady, Catherine. Jackson's hand stilled. Why would I be angry? Because she left. People get angry when people leave. Too much wisdom in such a small body. Jackson set down the harness, sat on a hay bale so he was closer to Thomas's height. I'm not angry at her. I'm angry at myself. Why? Because I wasn't there when she needed me. Thomas climbed up beside him, his little legs swinging. She says you were exactly where you were supposed to be. She says if you'd been there, you would have died too trying to save her. And then who would have saved us? Jackson's throat closed. She said that, Thomas nodded. She says everything happens in patterns like Mama Sarah's quilts. You can't see the picture when you're just one square. You have to step back to see how it all fits together. Your sister, Sarah, does she know about your dreams? She knows I'm different. It scares her sometimes, but she loves me anyway. Thomas looked up at Jackson. Do I scare you? Jackson thought about it. Really thought about it. No, he said finally. You don't scare me, Thomas. You make me hope. Hope for what? That death isn't the end, that love continues, that maybe somehow this all means something. Thomas smiled, the first real smile Jackson had seen from him. The lady says it does. She says we're all threads in a big tapestry, and God's the weaver. Sometimes threads have to cross in ways that don't make sense until you see the final picture. They sat together in comfortable silence, the man who'd lost everything and the boy who saw between worlds, while outside the storm began to build again. That evening, Sarah found Jackson in Catherine's sewing room. He stood at the window watching snow fall in the lamplight. I'm sorry, she said. I know this must be her room. Was her room. Jackson didn't turn. She loved this view, said she could see clear to tomorrow from here. Sarah moved to stand beside him. Tell me about her. Why? Because the dead should be remembered. Because their stories matter. Because, she hesitated, because you need to talk about her to someone who didn't know her. Someone who can listen without their own grief getting in the way. So Jackson talked. He told her about meeting Catherine at a church social when they were 17, about her laugh that sounded like silver bells, about how she couldn't cook to save her life, but tried anyway, burning everything with enthusiasm, about her dream of filling this house with children, about the 5 years they tried before she finally got pregnant, about her joy that lit up the whole ranch, about the baby clothes she sewed, the lullabies she composed, the plans she made, about the cattle drive he shouldn't have taken, about the early labor, about Caleb riding out to find him, but the storm making travel impossible, about arriving home to silence and grief in a tiny grave that shouldn't exist. She lived for 6 hours after, he said, voice barely a whisper. Held Lily the whole time, sang to her. That song Thomas hums. She sang it over and over, like maybe if she sang it enough, Lily would start breathing. Sarah's hand found his in the darkness. I'm sorry. The doctor said there was nothing anyone could have done. The cord was wrapped around Lily's neck. She never had a chance. And Catherine, she bled too much. Even if I'd been here. But you don't believe that. No, I think if I'd been here, I could have gotten her to town faster. Could have found a better doctor. Could have done something. Or you could have watched them both die anyway and carried that image forever instead of the image of Catherine at peace holding her daughter. Jackson turned to look at her. You believe that? I believe guilt is a poison that serves no purpose except to keep us from living. I believe your Catherine wouldn't want you punishing yourself for something beyond your control. How do you know what she'd want? Sarah smiled sadly. Because any woman who loved you enough to send messages through my brother's dreams wouldn't want you suffering. She'd want you living. They stood there, hands linked, watching snow fall, and Jackson felt something shift inside him. Not healing, not yet, but maybe the possibility of it. The third night of the storm, everything changed. Jackson woke to the sound of horses, not the wind that could sound like anything in the dark. Real horses, multiple riders moving carefully through the snow. He rolled out of bed, grabbed his rifle, and moved to the window. 3 riders, dark shapes against white snow circling the house like wolves. A soft knock at his door. Sarah stood there, fully dressed, Emma and Thomas behind her. They found us, she whispered. How many? 3 that I can see. But Blackwood never travels with less than 6. Jackson processed this. Take the children to the root cellar. Bar the door from inside. Don't come out no matter what you hear. Jackson, do it now. She hesitated, then grabbed the children and ran. Jackson heard the cellar door close, the heavy bar drop into place. Caleb appeared, shotgun in hand, Martha behind him with her late husband's pistol. Saw them, Caleb said grimly. They're surrounding us. A fist pounded on the front door. Open up, Mercer. We know you got our property in there. Jackson looked at Caleb. The old man nodded. Jackson opened the door, a rifle aimed at the man on his porch. Tall, silver-haired, expensive coat. Even in the snow and wind, he looked like money. Cold eyes, colder smile. You'd be Blackwood, Jackson said. Victor Blackwood, and you're harboring fugitives. I'm giving shelter to a woman and 2 children. Nothing fugitive about that. The woman owes me a debt. Her father's debt transferred upon his death. Debts don't transfer to daughters. They do when there's a contract, signed and witnessed. Show me the contract. Blackwood's smile widened. He pulled out a paper, protected in oiled leather. See for yourself. Jackson took it, read it by lamplight. His blood went cold. It wasn't just a debt transfer. It was a marriage contract signing Sarah over to Blackwood in exchange for her father's debts. This is dated 3 days before Bennett died, Jackson said. Yes, he was quite eager to settle his obligations. Sarah says he refused this deal. Women lie. So do men who murder their debtors. The smile vanished from Blackwood's face. Careful, Mercer. That's a dangerous accusation. Truth usually is. Blackwood studied him. You're new to this, so I'll give you one chance. Send out the girl and the brats. No one has to get hurt. No. No, you heard me. Do you know who I am? What I own, I could buy this ranch 10 times over. I could have you hanged for harboring fugitives. Try it. Something shifted in Blackwood's eyes. You love her. The girl. That's what this is about. This is about right and wrong. Right and wrong. Blackwood laughed ugly and sharp. Let me tell you about right and wrong. That woman's father borrowed $5,000 from me. Swore he'd pay it back in 6 months. It's been 2 years. You know what's wrong, stealing. Taking money and refusing to return it. He's dead. Hard to pay debts from the grave. Which is why the debt transfers. It's all legal. Legal and right aren't the same thing. They are when I own the judge. Jackson heard it, then carried on the wind despite the storm. Humming, Thomas's voice coming from everywhere and nowhere. Blackwood heard it too. His face went pale. What is that? Maybe your conscience finally catching up. Stop it. The humming grew louder. That haunting melody, beautiful and terrible. I said stop it. Blackwood pulled his gun. Jackson's rifle was already moving. Draw that and you're dead. My men will kill you. Maybe, but you'll be dead first. They stood frozen, weapons aimed, while Thomas's humming filled the night. Then another sound. Hoofbeats. Lots of them. Judge Margaret Harrison rode out of the storm like an avenging angel badge, glinting 10 armed men behind her. Evening, gentlemen, she said pleasantly. Heard there might be trouble out this way. Blackwood's face twisted. This is none of your concern, Judge. Murder is always my concern. She dismounted, walked up to the porch casual as Sunday. See, I got a wire from the sheriff in Pine Creek. Seems they found Robert Bennett's body. Want to know what else they found? Blackwood said nothing. Bruising on his throat that didn't match the rope. And a witness. Little boy saw the whole thing through the floorboards. A child's testimony means nothing. It does when combined with this. The judge pulled out a paper of her own. Affidavit from your own man, James Cooper. Says you ordered him to make it look like suicide. He's willing to testify in exchange for leniency. The silence stretched taut as wire. You're under arrest, Mr. Blackwood, Judge Harrison said, for the murder of Robert Bennett. That's when Blackwood made his mistake. He spun gun coming up, aimed at the house where Thomas's humming originated. 3 guns fired at once. Jackson's rifle, Caleb's shotgun, Judge Harrison's pistol. Blackwood fell backward into the snow red, spreading beneath him. His men threw down their weapons immediately. Anyone else feeling stupid? The judge asked conversationally. No one moved. It took an hour to sort everything out. Blackwood was alive barely. The doctor was summoned. Statements were taken. The contract was examined and declared invalid, forced under duress, the judge ruled. Sarah emerged from the cellar with the children when Jackson called the all clear. She took one look at the blood on the snow and covered Emma's eyes, but Thomas walked straight to where Blackwood lay groaning, looked down at him with those ancient child's eyes. The lady says you can still choose, Thomas said clearly. Even now, at the end, you can choose to tell the truth, to ask of forgiveness, to let go of the darkness. Blackwood's eyes went wide. What lady? The one who watches, the one who knows all the people you have hurt. She says their voices are very loud where you're going. Blackwood's face contorted in terror. I confess I killed Robert Bennett. I killed others too. The Murphy family, the Wheelers, anyone who couldn't pay. He was crying now, broken. I'm sorry, God, I'm sorry. Judge Harrison wrote it all down, got his signature, witnessed by everyone present. Blackwood died just as the sun broke through the clouds for the first time in 3 days. His last words were, I see them, all of them, waiting. Thomas turned away, found Jackson, held his arms up to be held. Jackson lifted him, and the boy whispered, the lady says justice isn't revenge, it's balance being restored. Later, after the bodies were removed and statements finalized, Judge Harrison pulled Jackson aside. That boy, there's something different about him. Yes. My grandmother was Lakota. She would have called him a bridge walker, one who stands between worlds. Is that what he is? The judge studied Thomas, who was helping Emma build a snow fort now that the storm had passed. I think he's whatever he needs to be for the people who need him. She left with her men and Blackwood's crew. The ranch fell quiet. Sarah stood on the porch watching the sun turn the snow to diamonds. It's over, she said, wondering. That part is, Jackson agreed. She turned to him. What happens now? Now you have choices. You're free. The children are safe. Your aunt in Idaho is still waiting, I'm sure. Is that what you want? For us to leave, Jackson watched Thomas and Emma playing their laughter bright as bells in the clean air. No, Pen. Then what do you want? He turned to her, this woman who'd crashed into his life with all the force of the storm that brought her. I want to show you something. He led her to the barn, to a locked room in the back. Inside, covered in dust and hay, was a trunk. Catherine's trunk. I haven't opened this since she died, he said. Couldn't bear it. Why now? Because Thomas said something about patterns, about not seeing the picture when you're just one square. He opened the trunk. On top was a letter sealed, addressed to him in Catherine's hand. With shaking fingers, he opened it. My dearest Jackson, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and Caleb finally gave you this letter. I made him promise to wait until you were ready. I hope you're ready. I'm writing this the night before my labor is to be induced. Something feels different. Wrong maybe, or just finished. Like my part in this story is coming to an end. Please don't blame yourself. I know you will because that's who you are, but please try not to. Some things are beyond our control. Some patterns are too big for us to change. I had a dream last night. A woman with dark hair and gray eyes standing in our kitchen. 2 children at the table. A boy who hummed our Lily's song. You were smiling, Jackson. Really smiling, not the pretend smile you've been wearing since we lost the 3rd baby. I don't know if dreams mean anything, but if they do, if this woman finds you, let her in. Let them all in. Our house is too big for ghosts. Fill it with life instead. I love you. I will always love you. But love multiplies, it doesn't divide. There's room in your heart for more than just my memory. Be happy, my darling. That's all I want. Be happy. Forever yours, Catherine. P.S. There's something else in this trunk. Something that might matter someday. Jackson dug deeper, found another envelope. Older, addressed to Catherine in a hand he didn't recognize. Inside was a birth certificate. Catherine's. But the father's name wasn't the man who'd raised her. It was Caleb Stone. Jackson's world tilted. Caleb was Catherine's father. His foreman, his friend, was his father-in-law. Jackson, Sarah's voice concerned. What is it? He handed her both letters, watched her face change as she read. She saw me, Sarah whispered, in a dream. Seems so. And Caleb is her father, has been here all along, watching over her, then watching over me. Jackson laughed, short and bitter. Everyone keeping secrets. Sarah touched his arm. Not secrets, protection. He was protecting you both. From what? From the weight of it, from questions that didn't need asking, from complications that didn't need complicating. She folded the letters carefully. My real name isn't Sarah Bennett. Jackson went still. It's Elizabeth Sarah Whitmore. My father was Richard Whitmore of the Boston Whitmores. Banking family, old money, very old. She smiled ruefully. When I was 18, I fell in love with a blacksmith's apprentice. James Bennett horrified my family. They forbade the marriage. So you ran. So we ran, changed our names. Well, James didn't have to change his much. Bennett was his middle name. We built a life. Had Emma, though. She's actually my sister Charlotte's child. Charlotte died in childbirth, and we took Emma as our own. Then Thomas came along, our miracle baby. And Blackwood was my father's business partner's son. We were supposed to marry, unite the fortunes. When I disappeared, it was a scandal. Blackwood's been hunting me ever since. Not for love, for pride, for ownership. Jackson processed this. So you're rich, Sarah laughed. Was rich. I'm sure father disowned me the moment I ran. I'm just Sarah now. Have been for 8 years. No, Jackson said slowly. You're Elizabeth Sarah Whitmore Bennett, soon to be Mercer. She blinked. What? Marry me. Jackson. I know it's fast. I know it's crazy. But Catherine saw you in a dream. Thomas knows things he couldn't know. You crashed into my life in a storm that should have killed you but didn't. He took her hands. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this is grief making me insane. But I don't think so. I think this is exactly what's supposed to happen. Sarah studied his face. You barely know me. I know you'd die for those children. I know you're brave enough to run into a blizzard rather than submit to a monster. I know you make my house feel alive again. That's not enough for a marriage. It's enough for a start. She was quiet for a long moment. Then there's something else. Something I haven't told anyone. The night Father James died, I was there. Hidden. I saw Blackwood kill him, but I also heard them talking before. Blackwood said, he said my real father, Richard Whitmore, is dead. Has been for 2 years. My mother too. Carriage accident, or so they said. You think Blackwood? I think Blackwood's been eliminating obstacles for years, and I think, she took a breath. I think my grandmother, my mother's mother, is still alive, Margaret Whitmore. She essentially runs Boston society now, and she has no heir except me. Jackson absorbed this. So you're not just rich, you're very rich. Potentially, if she accepts me, if she believes in me, if Blackwood didn't poison her against me. Only one way to find out. Sarah looked at him. You'd come with me to Boston. I'd go to hell itself if you needed me to. This might be worse. Boston society is complicated. Sarah Elizabeth, whoever you are, he cupped her face. I don't care about your money or your family or your past. I care about you, about Emma and Thomas, about the life we could build together. Even if that life is complicated. Especially then, I've had 3 years of simple grief. I'm ready for complicated. She kissed him, then soft and sweet and full of promise. Ask me again, she whispered against his lips. Elizabeth Sarah Whitmore Bennett, will you marry me? Yes. They were married a week later in Jackson's parlor, with Judge Harrison officiating and Caleb as witness. Emma wore a dress Martha Stone had sewn for her. Thomas stood as ring-bearer, humming his eternal melody. When Jackson had confronted Caleb about Catherine, the old man had broken down completely. I was 17, he'd said through tears. Her mother was 15, daughter of the ranch where I worked. When she got pregnant, her father would have killed us both. So they sent her away, had her marry another man quickly. I never even knew where she went until years later when Catherine showed up here with you. You knew all along, your own daughter. And I couldn't say anything. She thought her father was the man who raised her. She was happy in that belief. What good would the truth have done? She died calling for her father. She meant you. Caleb had sobbed, then the kind of deep, wrenching sobs that came from 3 years of suppressed grief. Jackson held him, these two men bound by loss and secrets, in love for the same woman. Now at the wedding, Caleb stood straight and proud, giving his blessing to this new union. Do you, Jackson, take this woman to be your wife? Judge Harrison asked. I do. Do you, Elizabeth, take this man to be your husband? I do. Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Montana, I pronounce you husband and wife. They kissed and Thomas burst into song. Not humming this time, but singing his clear child's voice, filling the words Catherine had never finished. Sleep, my darling, the stars are alight. Dream now, my darling, through the long winter night. Spring will come calling with flowers so bright, and love will wake with morning's light. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. That night, their wedding night, Sarah came to Jackson's bed, their bed now shy and nervous. I've only been with James, she admitted, and that was different. Different how? He was gentle, kind, but there was no fire. I loved him, but it was a quiet love, safe love. She looked at Jackson. This doesn't feel safe. No, he agreed, pulling her close. It doesn't. It feels like standing at the edge of a cliff. And I want to jump. They made love with a desperation born of loss and loneliness and the sudden shocking realization that they might actually be happy again. After lying tangled together, Sarah traced the scars on Jackson's chest from ranch work. From life, from that day he tried to dig Catherine's grave with his bare hands. We're both so damaged, she whispered. Good thing we found each other then. Damaged people understand each other. Do you think she knows, Catherine? That we're married? Thomas's voice drifted through the wall, humming in his sleep. Yeah, Jackson said. I think she knows. 2 months after the wedding, the letter came. Sarah Elizabeth stood in the kitchen, holding the expensive paper with its Boston postmark, her hands trembling. What is it? Jackson asked. It's from my grandmother, Margaret Whitmore. She looked up, eyes wide. She's coming here, with lawyers and documentation. And she says she's been looking for me for 8 years. Jackson took the letter, read it quickly. The tone was formal, but there was something underneath. Hope, maybe. Or desperation. "She'll be here in 2 weeks," he said. "Jackson, you don't understand. Margaret Whitmore doesn't just visit. She arrives with an entourage, with expectations, with the full weight of Boston society behind her. Then we'd better clean the house." "This is serious." "I am serious." He pulled her close. "Sarah, we knew this might happen. We talked about it. Talking about it and facing it are different things." From the doorway, Thomas's voice. "The lady says she's nice." They turned. Thomas stood there, still in his nightshirt, hair sticking up at odd angles. "What lady?" Sarah asked, though they all knew. "The yellow-hair lady, Catherine. She says the grandmother is sad and lonely and needs us as much as we need her." Emma appeared behind him. "Are we going to be rich?" "We're already rich," Jackson said, scooping her up. "We have each other." Emma rolled her eyes. "That's not what I meant, and you know it." Sarah laughed despite her anxiety. "We might have money, yes, but money doesn't change who we are. Can it buy me books? All the books you want. Then I like money." 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Martha Stone worked herself into a frenzy, cleaning everything twice. Caleb grumbled about city folks and their heirs, but secretly had the ranch hands repair everything that might look shabby. Jackson watched Sarah grow more anxious each day. She'd started as Sarah become Elizabeth in their private moments, but now she was transforming into someone else entirely. Someone who stood straighter, spoke more carefully, moved with a grace that spoke of childhood deportment lessons. "I don't like it," he told her one night. "You're disappearing." "I'm remembering it," she corrected. 8 years of being Sarah doesn't erase 18 years of being Elizabeth. "Which one is real?" "Both, neither. I don't know anymore." Thomas climbed into bed between them, a habit they'd given up trying to break. "The lady says you're you, no matter what name people call you," he said sleepily. "She says names are just clothes for the soul." "Your Catherine was a philosopher," Sarah murmured. "She was a lot of things," Jackson agreed. The day Margaret Whitmore arrived, it was snowing. Not a blizzard this time, just soft, gentle flakes that made the world look clean and new. The carriage that pulled up was exactly as ostentatious as Sarah had predicted. Black lacquer gold trim pulled by 4 matched grays that probably cost more than the ranch made in a year. Margaret Whitmore stepped out, and Jackson understood immediately where Sarah got her steel spine. The woman was 70 if she was a day, but she moved like a queen. Silver hair swept up in an elaborate style dress that probably came from Paris eyes that missed absolutely nothing. Those eyes found Sarah and filled with tears. "Elizabeth," she breathed. "Grandmother." They stood frozen, neither moving until Thomas broke the spell by walking straight up to the imposing woman and saying, "You're sit, would you like a hug?" Margaret Whitmore, terror of Boston society, looked down at this small, solemn boy and burst into tears. "Yes," she said, "I would like that very much." Thomas hugged her with the wholehearted commitment only a child could manage. After a moment of shock, Margaret hugged him back. "You must be Thomas," she said. "Yes, ma'am, and that's Emma hiding behind Papa Jackson, and that's Mama Sarah, who's also Elizabeth, but we like Sarah better, and that's Caleb, who's older than dirt, but nice, and that's Martha, who makes the best pie in Montana." Margaret laughed, a sound like crystal braiding. "My goodness, all that in one breath." "He talks a lot," Emma said, finally emerging from behind Jackson. "But he also sees things." "What kind of things?" "Dead people. But nice dead people, not scary ones." Margaret looked at Sarah, eyebrows raised. "We should go inside," Sarah said quickly. "You must be tired from the journey." Inside, sitting at Jackson's kitchen table with coffee and Martha's pie, Margaret Whitmore transformed from society matron to grandmother. 8 years, she said, looking at Sarah. 8 years of searching, hiring investigators, following false leads. Her voice broke. "I thought you were dead." "I'm sorry." "Don't apologize. You were 18, in love. Your father would have destroyed that boy if you'd stayed." Margaret's jaw tightened, just as he destroyed anyone who opposed him. "Father is dead," Blackwood said. 2 years now, your mother shortly after. Broken heart, the doctors claimed. Margaret's smile was bitter. Guilt, more likely. "You didn't love him." "Your father, no. It was an arranged marriage. Good for business." She looked at Jackson. You, on the other hand, married for love. It wasn't a question. Yes, ma'am. Good. Love is the only thing worth a damn in this world. She turned back to Sarah. I've come to make you an offer. Sarah tensed. What kind of offer? Come back to Boston, not permanently, just long enough to be officially recognized as my heir. There are documents to sign properties, to review accounts, to establish. I don't want $30 million. The kitchen went silent. I'm sorry, Jackson managed. The Whitmore fortune currently stands at approximately $30 million. Real estate investments, banking interests. Margaret sipped her coffee calmly. It needs an heir. Elizabeth is the only one. I have a family now, Sarah said. A life, here. I'm not asking you to give that up. I'm asking you to secure your children's future. Their children's future. Margaret looked at Emma and Thomas. They deserve choices, education, opportunity. They have everything they need. Do they? What happens when they grow up? When Emma's brilliant mind needs more than the local schoolhouse can offer? When Thomas's gift makes him a target for those who fear what they don't understand? Sarah looked at Jackson, lost. It's your choice, he said simply. Whatever you decide will make it work. You'd come to Boston. I'd follow you anywhere. It would be for several months at least, Margaret said. There's so much to sort out. Your father hid assets, moved money, and there are other complications. What kind of complications? Margaret hesitated. Victor Blackwood had a son. Victor Jr., he's been managing some of the Blackwood holdings since his father's death. He's ambitious. Is he a threat? Potentially. He blames you for his father's death. His father was a murderer. Yes, but sons rarely see their fathers clearly. That night, after Margaret had retired to the guest room, Catherine's sewing room now transformed into something approaching her standards. Sarah and Jackson lay awake talking. $30 million, Jackson said. It's obscene. It's security. Sarah turned to look at him. You want me to accept? I want you to do what's right for you, for the children. What about you? What about me? This ranch is your life. Montana is your home. I can't ask you to leave it. You're not asking. I'm offering. Jackson. Sarah Elizabeth, whoever you are today. He silenced her with a kiss. You're my home now, you and the children. The ranch is just land and cattle. Catherine built this place with you. And now we'll build something new. Together. A soft knock at the door. Thomas entered without waiting for permission, trailed by Emma. Can't sleep, Emma said. Bad dreams, Sarah asked, making room for them in the bed. Not bad, Thomas said. Just busy. The lady had a lot to say. What did she say? Jackson asked. She said, go to Boston. She said there's something there we need to pawn, someone we need to help. Who? Thomas yawned. She wouldn't say, just kept showing me a picture of a little girl with red hair crying. Emma nudged him. Tell them the other part. Oh, she also said Mama Sarah is going to have a baby. Sarah sat bolt upright. What? A baby, in winter, a girl. Her name will be Hope. Thomas snuggled down between them. The lady is very excited. She says Hope will be the bridge between the old family and the new family. Jackson and Sarah looked at each other over the children's heads. Sarah's hand went to her stomach. I have been feeling sick in the mornings, she admitted. For how long? 2 weeks, maybe 3. Jackson did the math. Their wedding night or shortly after. A baby, he said, wonder in his voice. We don't know for sure. The lady is never wrong, Thomas said sleepily. The next morning, Margaret found Sarah in the garden pulling the last vegetables before the frost killed them. You're pregnant, Margaret said. It wasn't a question. How did you? You're glowing and you keep touching your stomach. Margaret smiled. I had 4 pregnancies. Only your mother survived, but I remember the signs. They worked in silence for a moment, then Margaret said, this changes things. Does it? You'll want the baby born somewhere safe, with proper medical care. Jackson's first child died in childbirth. His wife, too. All the more reason to be in Boston near the best doctors. Sarah straightened, studied her grandmother. Why do you really want me to come back? Margaret was quiet for a long moment. I'm dying. Sarah's basket of vegetables fell from nerveless fingers. Cancer. Margaret continued calmly. The doctors say I have perhaps a year, maybe less. Grandmother, I need to know the fortune is in good hands. I need to teach you how to manage it, how to protect it from those who would steal it or misuse it. She took Sarah's dirty hands in her elegant ones. And selfishly, I want to know my great-grandchildren before I die. Is that so wrong? No, Sarah whispered. It's not wrong at all. That evening, the family gathered in the parlor. Margaret had asked for a formal meeting, and even Thomas had been scrubbed and dressed in his best clothes. I have a proposition, Margaret began. Come to Boston for 6 months. Let me teach Elizabeth everything she needs to know about managing the Whitmore fortune. In exchange, I'll set up a trust for the children Emma and Tom and any future children that will ensure they never want for anything. We don't need, Jackson started, $1 million per child accessible when they turn 21, plus education funds starting immediately. Jackson closed his mouth. Furthermore, Margaret continued, I'll purchase the adjoining properties here, expanding the ranch to 3 times its current size. You'll have the largest cattle operation in Montana. Why, Sarah asked. Because I want my grandchildren to have choices, to be able to live here if they want or travel the world if they prefer, to pursue education or ranching or art or anything their hearts desire. Margaret's voice softened. I was never given choices. Neither was your mother. I want to break that chain. Thomas climbed onto Margaret's lap, surprising everyone, especially her. You're scared, he said simply. Yes. Of dying alone. Yes. You won't, the lady promises. She says you'll be surrounded by love. He patted her cheek with one small hand. She says thank you for taking care of her family. Margaret's composure finally cracked completely. She sobbed, holding Thomas while Emma climbed up beside them, and Jackson and Sarah wrapped them all in an embrace. We'll come, Sarah said. 6 months, but then we come home. Of course, Margaret agreed through her tears. This is home. 3 days later, Caleb pulled Jackson aside. There's something you need to know before you leave, the old man said. About Catherine. About her mother. About why I could never claim Catherine as mine. They walked to the cemetery, stood before Catherine's grave. The roses Jackson had tried to plant were somehow growing tiny green shoots pushing through the snow. Catherine's mother was Margaret Whitmore's sister, Caleb said. Jackson's world tilted. What? Eleanor Whitmore. She was visiting a ranch in Texas where I was working. We fell in love, but she was already engaged to another man. When she got pregnant, her family hushed it up, sent her away to have the baby, then married her off quickly. So Catherine and Sarah are second cousins. Their grandmothers were sisters. Does Margaret know? I don't think so. Eleanor died young and the families lost touch. Caleb touched the gravestone gently. But Catherine knew at the end. Her mother told her in a letter just before she died, Catherine was going to tell you after Lily was born. Jackson absorbed this impossible truth. So this whole thing, Sarah coming here, the connection between our families, maybe it's coincidence, maybe it's fate. Caleb looked at him. Or maybe it's Catherine and Eleanor, and all the lost mothers working together to heal what was broken. You believe that? I believe love finds a way, even across death, even across time. The old man smiled. Why else would that boy know her song? That night, Jackson told Sarah everything. She listened in wonder, then laughed, really laughed for the first time since Blackwood's death. We're family, she said. We were always family. We just didn't know it. Does it change anything? It changes everything and nothing. She kissed him. We were meant to find each other, Jackson. All of us. This whole broken, beautiful, impossible family. The next morning, as they prepared for the journey to Boston, Thomas stood in the cemetery humming to Catherine's grave. Emma stood beside him, holding his hand. She's happy, Thomas said. She says the circle is closing and opening at the same time. What does that mean? Me, Emma asked. I think it means endings are really beginning as wearing masks. Jackson and Sarah watched from a distance as their children said goodbye to a woman they'd never met but somehow knew. Ready? Jackson asked. Sarah touched her still flat stomach where hope was growing. They all accepted Thomas's prediction as fact now. For Boston, for society, for million-dollar trusts and family secrets. For whatever comes next. She looked back at the ranch, at the home they'd built from grief and love and impossible connections. We'll be back. Yes, Jackson agreed, we will. As their carriage pulled away heading toward the railroad station and the journey east, Thomas started singing instead of humming. His clear voice carried across the snow. Sleep now, my darling, the stars are alight. Dream now, my darling, through the long winter night. Spring will come calling with flowers so bright, and love will wake with morning's light. Love never dies. It just learns how to fly from earth up to heaven, from heaven to sky. It falls like the snow to make all things new, and whispers forever, I'm still here with you. In the cemetery, the rosebush Jackson had planted burst into impossible bloom, red roses against white snow, as if Catherine herself was saying goodbye, and hello and thank you all at once. 6 months in Boston passed like a fever dream. Sarah learned to manage money and property, while Jackson learned to navigate society. Emma thrived in the best schools, while Thomas quietly terrified and enchanted Boston's elite with his uncanny insights. Margaret lived long enough to hold baby Hope when she was born in December, surrounded by the best doctors money could buy. She looks like Eleanor, Margaret whispered, cradling her great-granddaughter. Like Catherine. She died 2 days later, peaceful in her sleep, with Thomas holding her hand and humming that eternal melody. They returned to Montana in spring, to a ranch transformed by Margaret's money, but still fundamentally theirs. The house rang with children's laughter. The cemetery bloomed with roses that shouldn't grow in Montana soil but did anyway. And sometimes on quiet nights when Thomas hummed his song and Hope gurgled along and Emma read stories aloud and Sarah and Jackson sat entwined on the porch watching stars, they could feel them all, the lost ones, all the beloved dead, watching and approving and reminding them that love never really dies. It just transforms like snow, becoming water, becoming rain, becoming life, again and again and again, forever.